Greetings and welcome to the Department of Tangents podcast, episode 54, an interview with comedian Jess Salomon with an audiobook excerpt from Laurie Kilmartin's Dead People Suck, a guide for the survivors of the newly departed. I'm your host, Nick Zano. I was very happy how this interview came together. Some of you may know I've covered the comedy beat for the Boston Globe for the past 17 years or so. One of the best parts about that job is coming across somebody who's really funny that you don't know. Maybe they're just coming into their full voice. And a few weeks before this interview, I didn't know Jess Salomon. She's been through Boston, having gone to college at Tufts, but didn't start doing comedy until she went back to Montreal. And there's an important step in between that. She studied law, went back to Montreal, and got a job working for the UN Tribunal on War Crimes. It's a great backstory, which I found after seeing she was coming to town to play CitySide Comedy. And it should be noted, I would not have found out any of that backstory had her videos not shown her to be a smart, funny comedian, politically minded at times, but also personal and personable. I was glad when she agreed to sit down for this podcast when she came to town. A little bit more about how she went from war crimes to comedy. She originally started working on a very dark workplace comedy based on her experiences at the UN, a project she is still working on. Then she got on stage at an open mic in Amsterdam, of all places, because she could get there from the Hague where she was working. She got the bug and hasn't looked back since. She is an all-or-nothing type person, she says, which is good because it's hard to get anywhere in comedy without that. And this week's featured track is something a little different, a track from the audiobook version of comedian Laurie Kilmartin's Dead People Suck. Check it out after the conversation. But now, enjoy Jess Salomon. I've been interviewing comedians for 20 years. Okay. I've been doing this podcast for a couple of years. And I believe you are the first comedian I've ever talked to who was profiled in Canadian Lawyer magazine.
Oh, yeah, right.
and so before you did comedy, you worked at the UN. What was your title and what capacity?
So I worked at the tribunal that was set up for the former Yugoslavia. It was called the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the ICTY, and I worked for a judge there. So there was the prosecution, the defense, and then chambers, and I worked in chambers. So
what was chambers?
So chambers was the judges basically. So like imagine it was sort of like a clerkship. Mm-hmm. In that we were the ones that drafted the judgments and decisions. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't litigating on one part or the other. Mm-hmm. And the judge I worked for was the president of the tribunal, so he was like the chief justice. And so in addition to the work we had drafting judgments and decisions, we also dealt with the diplomatic community and reporting to the Security Council and the General Assembly, because he had sort of this kind of administrative role too for the institution, and assigning judges to cases and making sure, working on procedure stuff and making sure things kind of move more quickly, because things move pretty slowly there. Yeah. Uh-huh. And there were big cases that took a lot of time, and there was a lot of impatience on the part of the funders and the Security Council to, move things along. The tribunal now just finally wrapped up its work.
Well, when did they do that?
Well, there's just like the last little bit is the kind of residual mechanism it's called, but just very recently. I don't know, it ended very dramatically and in true fashion, war crimes tribunal, dark comedy fashion. There was one of the...
As everybody knows that trope of the dark comedy.
You know it is. Yeah, and it was one of the accused in the last case that was the judgment was being rendered. One of the accused, and I'm forgetting his name right now. It was like a case of a few different guys all together. He, as a judge, rendered his judgment to say that he was guilty. He exclaimed that he wasn't guilty. He wasn't a war criminal, and he said, "This is poison, and I'm going to drink it and kill myself." And he drank the poison and he killed himself in the courtroom. And it's all like live streamed. So they had to, shut the curtains and take him. Apparently, it was pretty gruesome.
Well, this was awkward. We were about to say not guilty.
Yeah. I disagree.
It's just bad timing.
Yeah.
What did you? They tell him he was not guilty as he had just followed the poison.
No. They were confirming it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oops. People really need to listen. They need to take the time to listen. Yeah. No, he knew he was going away, and he wanted to dramatically let people know that he disagreed and he wasn't what they were, accusing him of. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's where I worked. So I worked for the judges on the judges side, basically, which is not really a side exactly.
Right, and you still obviously follow.
I follow the big stuff, yeah. That was like, and I have some friends that are, still in that world, so I catch up with them from time to time and hear their stories. And now that I'm in New York, I have a couple friends that ended up working for the UN in New York, so we get to be in the same city. And I stay a little bit connected to that world, but I've really at this point lost so much of there was a point when I started doing, like when you do a big career switch, where you sort of start to lose your expertise in the thing that you've left, but you're not good at the new thing yet. So it's kind of a terrible time where you just feel like you're not good at anything. And now I feel much more competent in comedy because it's been almost nine years, and I feel completely so far away from law world and a little bit out of touch with what the developments that have occurred since I left, which was a little while ago now. Yeah.
You've mentioned the sort of dark humor.
That stuck with me. Yeah.
Of that. What were some examples?
That was my
of
comedic training. Was examples. Well, there was the kind of like typical stuff. These accused were huge characters, and they were basically there to obstruct the process. So that already sets up a comedy of sorts, because you've got all these, for the most part, well-meaning international people who are there to try to deliver justice in an almost impossible situation where the worst crimes have been committed. And these are the tools that we have, which is this like imperfect system. And then these guys arrive and they don't believe that they're guilty of anything because they weren't criminals otherwise. They don't have criminal records. They're military leaders, they're propagandists, they're political leaders, intelligence officers. And they show up and they're all, these big personalities who are used to commanding a lot of attention, having a lot of power. They're not used to being told what to do. And now they're in a courtroom in a scenario that's being live streamed back to their country where they know people that support them are watching, and they're just there to put on like basically an obstruction show. So one of them, then that's the obstruction show.
Starring.
Yeah, and then we've got like, so they're just want to use whatever the human rights are that are available to them, rights of, that apply to the defense or the accused, in every way possible to try to exploit those delays and, make things impossible for the judges and the prosecution. So, like going on hunger strike was definitely a big one. There was one guy.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, named Sheshel, who went on hunger strike, and then we'd get like the medical report to see like where they were at in the hunger strike, how serious things were, and the medical report for Sheshel came back, and it just said that he needed to lose weight. So that was like an example of the kind of stuff.
And that sort of led you to comedy in a way, because your first sort of attempt at comedy was writing a script for a workplace comedy based on your experiences?
That was the inspiration. Was originally I thought I'd leave. I would learn. I would write a sitcom based on my workplace. That would be a dark comedy that's set in a war crimes tribunal. And it took me a long time to actually end up doing that, because I ended up getting sidetracked into comedy. So I started taking some screenwriting courses the first year that I left. Part of it was I had a lot of naivete about comedy. I didn't know. In my head, I was like, well, I'll leave law for 2 years. If I don't,
and you'd been working there for about 5, right?
So I'd been working probably in law for 4 or 5, because I did other jobs. Like I was an intern there, and then I worked in the Justice Department in Canada, and then I ended up working there as the like 2.5 years as like a fully fledged lawyer after intern and all of that. But yeah, I guess I thought that if I don't make it, I'd take 2 years off. And then if I didn't make it in comedy, I'd go back to law, because I didn't know how hard comedy was.
Right.
But that's, I guess, like nobody really realizes how long and difficult things are when they're not in them. So I thought, I'll write a script, and if it doesn't get on TV, then or I'll see if I like it. If I'm good at it, 2 years will be enough to determine that.
Right.
And it was just like the very beginning. And in that time, I took some screenwriting courses. I wrote a spec script at the time for The Office, because that was like the show I was watching a lot. I was looking at my workplace like a little bit like The Office, but sort of meets like MASH or Night Court kind of thing. And then I got on stage and tried to stand up, and then I just got completely hooked on that. And then the script writing kind of like, I did it a little bit here and there. I submitted a couple things, but it's only now that I have an actual like pilot script for that show that I ended up working with a good friend of mine named Deanne Smith. She's a stand-up, and my best friend in comedy that's not my wife, who's definitely my best friend, and
who travels with you.
Who's here, and we travel together a lot. And Deanne and I do some shows where we co-host in Toronto, like six of them per year, let's say. And so with her, I ended up writing that script, and it's now like in one of the various draft forms of it, but it's at least like been written, and we're reviewing it. So hopefully that'll get to see the light of day sometime. I hope so. But yeah, that was the initial inspiration, was seeing like a funny dark comedy, gallows humor in my workplace, and feeling, and also kind of not really loving law that much. It just was kind of.
Well, you did at one point though. Or at least you enjoyed human rights.
That's it. I just wanted to do good in the world, and law seemed to be the best tool for me of something concrete that I could do, because I knew that I couldn't like ever be a forensic scientist excavating mass graves, I didn't have the stomach or the constitution or the bravery for some of the field work. So I was like, okay, well, I could see myself lawyering on behalf of people that need a voice. I know how to read and write. Because I knew I couldn't be like a doctor without borders, I didn't have like medical skills or scientific skills or investigatory skills, and but it was sort of like by default. It wasn't that I grew up like dreaming about being a lawyer. It just was sort of the thing that I thought I could do to help.
But what did you grow up dreaming of being, if anything? Oh
God, so many things. I didn't really have I'm very easily influenced by what's around me. And probably was just watching The Office that I was like, I guess I'm going to become a comedy writer. Like my life has been a series of obsessions where I just get really into something, and then I just go full blast into it.
So now we're in a hotel lobby and you really want to be a Starbucks barista.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Barista. Yeah. I mean, I live in Brooklyn, so there's a lot of opportunities. Right. I've really moved to Brooklyn, to the headquarters of barista culture, or hipster barista culture. But yeah, when I was younger, I mean, many things, but I didn't really, there wasn't anything. I mean, there was in the 80s, not in the 80s, I guess I'd say like when I was a kid, in the late 80s and early 90s. When did Wall Street come out? With Gordon Gekko, Wall Street.
87, 88, somewhere around there.
Okay, so I guess I saw that when I was little, and that kind of and then I kind of wanted to be a stockbroker for a few years, until like through school. I what a terrible thing to be influenced by, but I was like, I loved that movie at that time, and I wanted to be. I thought my dad and I would maybe go into business together. And he was worked in real estate. He wasn't like a stockbroker or anything, but yeah, I was like, it all seemed so exciting to me, the stock market. I didn't really understand what it was, but I really like it. I just thought maybe like I'd be a big businessman kind of thing. I like the idea of like wearing a suit and like getting into like some kind of car in the morning with my dad, and both of us wearing our suits. I mean, that's a kind of maybe I should have realized that was a bit of a gay as I talk about it now. I want to wear a suit and get in a car with my dad and go to work with my briefcase. Okay, I might have been gay.
But it's funny how we latch on to possible futures. I remember as a kid wanting to become a lawyer after I saw Inherit the Wind with Kirk Douglas and Jason Robards.
Okay.
And I thought that's what
it was.
What it was. And I went into international studies when I went to college, and I wound up with an English degree instead.
Okay.
Because it turns out the part that I missed is because that I was interested in law because of the play.
Oh.
It was the big part of that.
Did you realize that like, when you decided to switch, or was that only sort of in retrospect, looking back?
I didn't enjoy the people I was around in the college Democrats and the college Republicans and the political aspect.
Where did you go to school?
University of Buffalo.
Okay.
And I didn't enjoy what surrounded that, and meanwhile every elective that I was taking was an English elective, so I wound up staying an extra year and getting an English degree because I was like 2 degrees, I was like 2 courses or something away from an English degree anyways, just because everything I was taking was literature or something. So that's how I wound up.
It's just you started looking at what you were doing for fun and in the other kind of courses that you weren't required to take, and then
what I was passionate about. And by that point I was an editor at the school magazine and part of a sort of thrown together theater troupe that had a lot of fun putting on like the Real Inspector Hound and things like that.
Cool.
I wound up realizing that I was going in a different direction already.
Yeah.
And I just decided to keep going in that direction.
Sometimes you have to listen to that. Yeah.
Yeah. But you were in Tufts and you saw
I went to Tufts.
somebody
oh my God,
speak on
on human rights. Yeah. This is it's so fun to be back in Boston. I went to the Burren last night.
There a couple of days ago. That's where I met my wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's great. I mean, it was just Davis Square and things have changed a little bit since I was here, but not that much. And that place is exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And it was cool to show my wife. I was like, this was my place. I mean, once I was like, the thing is here, you can't drink until you're 21. So let's say it was my place like later on in the college years, but that's so cool. So you guys just met chatting there? We
were both musicians. We met.
Were you in the booth playing? Because I love how they set up where the musicians are, and that, like they have it's not a booth. It's kind of like a booth area.
It was Hugh McGowan's Tuesday night open mic.
Okay.
And we were both musicians, and we were tuning our guitars, and they used to let you tune your guitars in the back room, and and then we started. She grew up in Texas, so we started talking about Texas singer-songwriters, and that's how we sort of.
That's awesome.
Started out.
Okay. Oh, that's romantic. I like that.
Yeah,
I love that place, and then we went to. I remembered. I just had this flash of this food, what I used to eat late at night in my dorm room, which was this. I'd never had. This is going to sound weird, but I never had a sub sandwich before before coming to Tufts, because in Montreal we didn't really have that. I mean, it was before there was like Subway chains there, or, like at least there, and you didn't see like sub sandwiches, or, so. When we would be stoned in the dorm room, we would always order subs from this place, Espresso Pizza, and they had calzones and subs. So I was at Tufts for, it was the best time. I had the best time here. And
was there any sort of culture shock or adaptation coming to Boston from Montreal?
I mean, just that I had only just turned 18 in Montreal, so I was able to drink at home. And then I got here, and I had this attitude of like, whatever, 21,
any place would be a culture shock at 18, it seems like.
Maybe, yeah.
Because you might have lived someplace for 18 years, but you're still...
Yeah.
You're a teenager. You haven't really experienced probably what
that. Yeah. I hadn't experienced living away from home before. I mean, I'd been to camp and stuff in the summer, but I have had a very nice life actually. Camp, and I got here, and it was just really like, I guess the culture shock was just the American culture around going to college, which people seem to have been preparing for in a big way. You know, like there's a lot of, everything sort of seems to lead to your college years in terms of like everything that you do is to get credits for college, and there's a lot of prep for it, and everybody seems to know. But when you're international, like in Montreal, people just sort of go to McGill and they might still live at home. It's not like this go away, transformative, best years of your life, like I mean, there is some fraternity culture in that, but it's not the same thing. So everybody shows up and they all have like these station wagons packed with everything that they're going to need for their dorm room, and they're with their parents, and they've probably already previously gone to visit many different schools, whereas like I just had a suitcase and I got on the plane with my mom and then we got
So did you not have the
we just didn't really know what to expect or what kind of things people would need, and so we got here and I just like bought some stuff from the room. But
you didn't have the permanent record thing hanging over your head in high school. The people would tell you this goes on your permanent record and it'll affect your ability to get in college. That scared the crap out of me in high school.
I mean, a little bit. I didn't know that I needed to like build up a resume and like stuff, and I did do some volunteering with old people, which was definitely for college and not because I wanted to hang out with people that were probably on their, you know, like in the hospital ward, you know, the geriatric area. I mean, most of those kids that are going around to talk to the people in that ward are there for college purposes, I feel like.
Not because they're actually interested in the people who are there.
Oh, no. I mean, one time I went to talk to this was my worst memory of that. I went to talk to this one guy, and he was I thought he was sleeping, but it turned out he was dead. And it was just like in the moments, and because he looked like a weird color, and anyway, that's kind of gruesome.
Well,
but anyway,
how long did you talk to him before you realized?
No, I just was like, hello, oh, okay, and then I just sort of mentioned it to the nurse, you know, and she was
talkative.
like, and then the next thing I know, they just sort of went in there and like closed the curtain around him, and
so it wasn't like you were there for half an hour going, geez, fine, I can take a hint, and walked out, and then somebody walked in and screamed.
Yeah, no, because I mean, but that, yeah, I have talked to people without a response for a long time, so it wouldn't be completely out of character.
It goes to the dark sense of humor.
The dark, yeah. Maybe this guy will, yeah. But yeah, so at Tufts, it was great. I had like the full blown American college experience, which is really like, I mean, I get it. It's a really fun time because everybody is away from home. I mean, when you're away from home, and it's not like just an extension of high school, right? Because if you just go to your university in your own city and you live at home and you still have your same friends, it's not at all. It's not the same life experience. I mean, intellectually, the courses and all of that is different, but it's definitely a luxury to be able to like come to Boston and like live in a dorm and you know have that whole experience.
I feel like I learned as much socially as I did intellectually from college.
Oh, God, yeah, definitely. I mean,
all sorts of different
huge.
people that I wouldn't have necessarily interacted with on a regular basis.
Yeah, I was sort of already starting to get into the band Fish, and it was just sort of starting at that point. It was like I'd seen them in Montreal in like very small venues at that time, and I had a baseball hat with their logo. And when I got to Tufts, I mean, this isn't talking about a diverse group at all, but I did meet like my group of like fellow like Fish fans, which there didn't really exist that much in Montreal. But when I got to Boston, and I thought it was like kind of a unique thing, but when I got to freshman orientation with my cap, like I met like so many people just talked to me because of that, and then we all became friends. It was like shopping for friends that freshman orientation week, and then just
was it music in general, or was it?
It was that bad.
Just
well,
Fish
and Grateful Dead, and then I guess it kind of like with that came like a certain kind of like type of personality that people who were interested in the environment and you know and human rights and like.
Well, these things are signifiers in a way, you know.
Yeah.
It's a way.
Also drugs.
Well, there's that. I never drank a drop of beer until I went to college, so my roommates had fun with me. But I mean, it's the same thing as you know, wearing a football jersey somewhere.
Exactly.
So you can it's a way that maybe you can find somebody else in this mess.
It's true.
It's a starting point.
I mean, today I guess it's the Make America Great Again red hat,
Well, that's one signifier. Politics
Yeah.
is one signifier. Sports
Yeah.
is a signifier. Music is a signifier.
Yeah.
It's a starting point for people.
Yeah, and I didn't realize at the time how useful it would be to wear a signifier that particular week, but it made it easy to find like my crew of people. It was just stuff I was just starting to get into, and then in college, and then it just really like took off and went to see so many shows. And
Were you seeing comedy at all? It's a great
no,
town for comedy.
I know. I didn't. Comedy was not even on my radar at all.
You never even as a kid once saw a comedian and thought maybe I'd like to do that?
I couldn't imagine it as like something that I would do. I enjoyed comedy. I never thought of it really as a career. Not in college. I was just like, so, like I said, like I'm just very obsessive. So at that time that was like everything was music. Everything was also like international relations and politics and human rights and that. And then, I got involved in my last year in this program that I probably still exists there. It was this part of the experimental college, which was more sort of experiential kind of learning. And it was called EPIC was the acronym. And was Education for Public Inquiry and International Citizenship. Oh my God.
So
I can't believe I remember that. I'm so proud of myself right now. Anyway, so that was, EPIC. And every year was a different theme. And my year, it was refugees, migration, and international security. And so that was sort of my introduction to human rights was through like refugee issues. Because human rights per se as like a course wasn't really a thing exactly yet.
The mid 90s or so?
Yeah, like 90. This one would have been 97, 98.
Okay.
And anyway, but the whole point of that course was we had speakers on different topics around the issue of refugees. So like whether it was like an economist or a political scientist or someone speaking to like cultural issues and whatever it was, health issues, and then the students designed an international conference that was several days long at the Fletcher School, and we invited the top speakers and scholars in those various areas to speak to the main theme, which was like refugees and migration and security issues. So that's where I got turned on to human rights, and it kind of coalesced the idea around, I want to work in that. It wasn't yet law, but eventually I learned that within human rights, going to law school was kind of an inevitable thing if I wanted to do that. And there was a speaker, which I guess is what you were hinting at, that was from Montreal and worked at McGill, a man named, a dude, his name is Erwin Kotler, and he came and he spoke about human rights issues and was just very inspiring. And when I learned that he was from Montreal and at McGill, I wanted to work for him. So I ended up working as an intern for him in between college and law school. And that was sort of what tipped me off. But it's very much, I'm like very much this obsessive person that was like, it was all about that. And I feel badly for people. Sometimes I see people in comedy that are torn between like their day job and comedy and, and are balancing these two things. And it seems really, really hard because I kind of only have, like, I like to put all my energy into one thing. And
Eddie Murphy said, I think at one point, I wish I could find where he said it. I think it was on Carson or something, that if you want to make it in the entertainment industry, don't have a plan B because you'll take it.
Yeah.
So there's a certain logic to going all in on something.
Totally.
If you spread yourself too thin, you might not.
I think if you think about the fact that other people around you are going all in and you're only half in, like, it's already such a challenging, career, and the odds are already so slim of you getting anywhere that you kind of have to just go for it. I mean, that's the reason to move to New York. That's the reason. Like, it's like it, or like with law, it was like, if I'm doing this, like when I was working in in the Canadian government is like, if I'm working in the Canadian government, I should be in Ottawa. As much as Ottawa sucks, that's where everything is going down. You know,
I don't know if I have any listeners in Ottawa.
Sorry, Ottawa. Sorry. I do. You know, it is where I became gay in a way, was Ottawa. It's right. That's another story. So, you know, not all bad on the Ottawa front, but
where you realized or where you became.
No, I mean, I still identify as bisexual, but it was where I first started dating.
Spider and then became.
The radioactive spider was a little television show called The L Word, which is
coming back apparently.
Is it?
I'm not sure if it's
right.
for sure, but I read that they're starting to move towards that.
You know what? It's true, because I did see in my Twitter feed some prominent lesbians I know, younger ones that were pitching themselves for that new cast. Yeah. But yeah, I started watching The L Word, which is it was like a lesbian soap opera basically on television with very, very attractive women, as TV is, and they would all just pull each other into bathroom stalls to make out. And it just seemed like very cool and easy, and I just was like, I've been going to the bathroom with women my whole life and like nothing, so.
You want to see how they pitched that show? What was the first meeting for that like?
Yeah. Well, so women are already in the bathroom together, so
Great,
there's
but don't you want to hear more? No,
that's it. Yeah.
Showtime needs a hit.
8 seasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so I don't want to blame put it all on television, and the gay agenda. I think it was definitely the government, that made me gay. It was working for the government in Ottawa with some time on my hands.
What's their percentage rate of that then? How many people?
Ottawa's pretty gay, I feel like. I don't know. Also, like my first day there in the city, I went to get a mani-pedi, and the guy next to me, there was a guy next to me getting a pedicure, and he was getting like hot pink nail polish, and he looked like a civil servant. This was his like little rebellion.
There is the sign when you enter the city, or when you enter Ottawa, that says, Ottawa, we're pretty gay.
Exactly. Yeah, that is a slogan. Well, yeah. I mean, Justin Trudeau.
Right there on the sign, so plants a seed when you.
That's how they get you. Yeah. But. We got off on the tangent of Ottawa now.
You were talking about how
go to the place. So yeah, Ottawa. And then when I was working in like international criminal law, it was like I got to be in the Hague. The Hague is where all the international courts are, and so I do think somebody, I forget who said this quote, but if you're a coal miner, go where the coal is. And with comedy too, I mean, that's the thing. It's good. I think there's something to be said for developing and also saving money and being in a smaller market. But at some point you have to make the move to. Eventually, when you're famous, you can live anywhere. But I think at some point you have to go to New York or Los Angeles or London
There's an odd parallel here of sort of when you're of self-discovery as you go on. In Ottawa, you discover that you're gay, and when you're clerking about war crimes, you discover. Well, maybe this isn't the way.
I'm attracted to war criminals.
Well, you're attracted to. It just and it went on from there. Did you discover you were funny? Did you always think you were funny?
Yeah, I mean, so I never. It's not like I, watched The Tonight Show and followed comics closely and did their act and rehearsed their monologues.
But you were like the funny clerk or something.
I was definitely, and all the people that I ended up becoming friends with are funny people who have really dark senses of humor, and the lawyers that I hung out with, the conversations were not so different from the conversations you have with comics, in the sense that with comics you joke about really dark stuff, and things that you wouldn't say sort of quote unquote around civilians, and the UN world is like that, or at least with my group of friends. We joked a lot in really dark ways and said a lot of really inappropriate things because it was a release from the environment that we are in, like the way that I'm sure that doctors in a surgery make jokes that if you just heard them out of context or at a dinner party and you weren't one of them, you'd think like that's so awful, you know. So
and now when you have those conversations, there's no excuse. You're not trying to, it's not a release. You just didn't, you have to admit you just enjoy the really dark conversations.
Exactly. Now we're just like, oh, you're a messed up comic who's got like a sick sense of humor. And yeah. And that's part of like the comedy brain, I guess. And now I'm just like in a world where that's what I do all the time is and you know, it becomes like there's a comedian named Tim Dillon. I don't know if you know him. He's so funny. Anyway, he wrote this status update on Facebook about a friend of his father's, whose son was wanting to do comedy or just done comedy in college and was like interested in pursuing it, and asked Tim to like write him some advice. And Tim is hilarious. And anyways, he wrote this long piece that I'm not going to do any justice to, but he talks about how comedians are kind of sick, or people that like sometimes aren't sick but want to become sick start like hanging around. Right. And I feel that because I did have this like career, because the perception with comedy is that like you can't do anything else, and like a true comic, because why would you choose this unless you had to do it? Okay. And I did have a career before, so I didn't have to do it. But then I guess I did, when I read his status, I related it to it so much, because I feel that now I've spent enough time around comedy that I too am now sick, and I can't do, it would be hard for me to imagine doing anything else. So I don't think it was my starting point, but it sort of is like, my brain is switched to this place. I think it always was there, but it's now fully in that place where it's hard for me to look at the world not as a comedian, not to be looking for those jokes. And
that's part of what I was thinking about, of the theme of you sort of discovering yourself in Ottawa and becoming a comic. It's that there are a lot of bits in your story where you have discovered things that you probably always were. Yeah. Which is not unlike what the job of a comic would be, of sharing this, discovering things that you always, that epiphany that this is what you've always been.
Nick, you're blowing my mind right now. This is true. This is very true. Yeah, I mean, I always, I think that you have to be, in comedy, you have to be a sort of a naturally funny person. Like, that has to be in you, and then you develop the skills around writing jokes and being on stage and learning how to control a room and all of that. But at the heart of it, you have to have something in you that's a funny way of looking at the world or expressing yourself, or, you know.
Did people tell you that as a kid, or?
I guess, you know, what people always really asked for, they always asked for me to tell stories about my family when I was a kid. I did entertain my friends and classmates with, I mean, I did have like some low-key pranks, but I wasn't a class clown really, but I did entertain people with stories about things that had happened to me or about my parents or whatever. That I always did my whole life since I was little. So always, like at the sleepover, I was always the one telling the story, and people would ask for some stories again, you know, also. So I guess I had a couple of greatest hits. There was one that I couldn't tell today, but I remember that it was, you know,
you couldn't tell today, or
I can't remember how I told it, because it was so long ago, and like I just remember one that people asked for a few times was when I went with my parents and my sister to Disney World, and to specifically like the MGM Studios had just opened. And we got up, and it was raining really hard, and my mom had done her hair, and she decided she was going to walk around with a shower cap on all day so as not to ruin her hair. And it was just like all of the like many people and places we went along the way, and their reaction to my mom and her shower cap and how embarrassing all of that was.
I just thought she was some weird Disney character. Yeah. Oh, you're from what Bed Knobs and Broomsticks or something. I can't remember what you. I can't. It's the jacket that's throwing me off.
People are taking pictures with her. It's my hero.
All the Disney princesses, and then your mom with the shower cap, just smiling. I don't know why I'm here.
She definitely was doing that trip for us, and did not care about any of Disney World. It would be hilarious if No, people thought that she was a character on top of it all when she didn't pay attention to any of those movies. Yeah, so that was like, that I remember was like one of my hits. But I can't remember how to like tell the story other than the fact of it.
So when you discovered comedy, were you thinking, oh, this is sort of something I've always kind of been doing in some respect, or did it all seem...
There was a part of it, and I also just, I remembered, even in law school, there was a couple of moments where I did like model, like it's like we have this thing called moot court. It's sort of like a model UN, but for court scenarios where, whenever I did any kind of like public speaking or courtroom stuff, even in the sort of simulated way, I just always I enjoyed getting up in front of people and trying to entertain them a little bit. I also this happened just before I made the switch, and I know one of my friends would probably like me to mention it. I gave a speech at this friend's wedding, and but this is like a terrible thing where it's like you don't want people to think like, oh, I made a funny speech at a wedding, I should be a comedian. I think it
happens a lot. And then people get up there and they're like, this isn't the same.
It's not the same, right? But the thing about that particular speech was I took a huge risk, and of course you don't want to. It's a risk because I made fun of my friend in a way that I wasn't sure that she realized was something about her that we all laugh about.
You did a tight five instead of...
Yeah. I did this impression of this girl was getting married, the bride, and it's something we all joked about. And I mean, it was in the context of a nice speech, but it was, let's say, the joke that was the biggest risk because it could really go badly. And I knew that everybody would know what I was referring to and would like it, but I didn't know if she would, and I didn't know if people would go along with it, because also you don't want to, the worst thing would be to like offend the bride on her wedding day. You know, the stakes are like kind of high. And anyway, so
There's always that scene in the rom-com where that happens.
Exactly.
Somebody gets drunk and...
Yeah, and I wasn't even, I mean, it wasn't even like a random, I'm drunk, we grab the mic kind of thing. It was like...
premeditated.
It was premeditated, and I wasn't that drunk, so... Anyway, but, and I did this impression of her, which basically was her Jekyll and Hyde personas, where she's like this really fun person sometimes, but she's also this... person who like will take you aside and like ask you like what your goals are in life and how you're accomplishing them, and like kind of like the job interview version of her that's like really strict and everybody's scared of, and so we all knew that these things about her, but we had never like brought it up to her. Anyway, so I did it, and it went really well, and so that was like that real, it wasn't just the like the high of the laughter of people, it was the high of the taking a risk of something like a joke that could go terribly, and instead it going really well, and that was a moment that like really hooked me, I think, into it too.
That's an essentially comic moment, I think, of that.
Yeah,
telling something that everybody in this room might hate me, but if they don't, then I know I've got them.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was a really that was a bit of a definitive moment too.
And your first open mic was in Amsterdam?
So it's true. So before I left, I decided to try.
Before you left?
Before I left the Hague and that job and everything, I did go to do an open mic in Amsterdam, and which was like an hour and a half at least train ride after work from the Hague, maybe 2 hours. And so I booked the open mic, and
wait, did you just search for an open mic somewhere near the Hague? That's got to be something that
I just searched for.
Yelp wasn't.
No, there wasn't a lot. There was I guess I looked for comedy clubs, and then I looked for their calendar, and I figured, I mean, it was only Amsterdam would be the only place, like, because it was the only place where there was anyone that like would be English speaking, and because there was also the language issue. And also the Dutch issue, they're not very, they don't laugh easily. They're not known for their sense of humor. And so I booked an open mic, and then I think I went the week before or 2 weeks before just to check out the place. And I had told my friends about when I was doing it, and they were going to come with me, like people from work. My work friends were my friends, like that's all like expat life basically. And then I went and I got to the place, and they told me that my week was canceled for a private event, but I could go up that night if I wanted to. And I was already there, and I kind of thought, you know what, I don't have anything planned, but I do have jokes about the Dutch because that's all we do all the time. Is another factor of expat life. You all shit on the country that you're in, and the Dutch were an easy target. So I had a lot of material about the Dutch, and so I thought, maybe it's better that nobody's here, and even though I'm not prepared,
nobody that you know.
Nobody that I know is here.
Was it packed as a place?
It wasn't packed, but there were definitely like a good 20, 25 people there. It wasn't a huge place. And so I decided to go on stage, and the MC was, I think, like a British guy who like lived in Amsterdam, and then most of the acts were all Dutch speakers, so they were doing stand-up in Dutch, which I didn't understand, but it was so funny to hear the rhythm of like, oh, and that's a punchline, even though you don't understand the language at all. And then
because they were all doing knock-knock jokes, and the crowd response,
yeah.
I had no idea this was
exactly
what the Dutch liked.
Yeah, I still don't know what the Dutch like, but they
seems so tame compared to the rest of Amsterdam.
Right? I mean, that's the thing. You have this impression of Holland that it's going to be this like wild place, because we all know that drugs are legal and prostitution, and but meanwhile they're so conservative, and yeah, they're the opposite of that. I mean, they're politically liberal, but they're social, like they're just small c conservative, in their way of being. Anyway, so I got up on stage and I just sort of did some jokes about the Dutch and about like what's the deal with your like orange corduroys and I don't know whatever, and it was like it was okay, but I just was very distracted by I'd never been under a spotlight before, and I couldn't see anything, and it felt hot.
You stood to the side, right?
Yeah, so I stood next to it because I just didn't feel comfortable there, and then that was like the main note that the MC gave me. He was like, "You gotta."
Metaphorical is that?
I was like, "That's not for me right now." This is good. Yeah.
When was the next time you tried it?
So the next time was once I'd moved back to Montreal, which is where I'm from, and I at the time had a girlfriend there, so I just moved in with her. She had a house, so it was really convenient because we'd been long distance for a long time, and I wanted to really see if the relationship could work in the same city, because Amsterdam or Holland to Montreal is a very obviously big distance. So that was also part of it. So I moved in with her, and then also I had a place to explore this without rent or anything, and so it was it worked out well for a little while, and I started taking screenwriting courses and just like looking at what was comedy, what was happening, and I saw that there was a comedy class at the comedy club called the Comedy Nest in Montreal, and it was one of the sort of veteran comics in Montreal was giving a class, and a guy I knew was taking it, so I signed up, and that was my first. And then as soon as I started doing the class, I also started doing open mics, and kind of at the same time, and then I just got deep into it and was doing it as much as possible, and driving like pretty much right away to Ottawa to do open mic nights there, so I could try to get on stage, several times a week, already from the get-go. Yeah.
Did you have a thread of who you wanted to be?
No,
then?
oh my God. I mean, I'm only just figuring it out now, and this conversation is helping a lot.
Oh, well, I'm glad I could help.
It's some people like get on the scene, and they just like, some people right away they're natural writers, some people are natural performers, some people straight away know what their look and their brand and their persona is, even though they don't have the jokes yet. There's like things that come naturally to some people. The persona and the brand didn't like really. It's only like I still am just like figuring that out. But and I didn't have like a lot of confidence because I think there's something to be said for starting when you're like 18 or 20 or something, and you kind of don't. It's different when you're 30 and you've had a career, and you also as a comedian you want to not be apologetic, and you just want to say the thing, right. and whereas I'd grown up in a way where I was so trained and now law school and so careful about how I say things, and literally working in a diplomatic environment, it's the opposite of what I had to untrain so much of that to just say the thing, and I still like now I'm almost just leaning into the apologetic persona at this point, but yeah, no, I think at the beginning I leaned heavily on like sex material because it just was the easiest to write, easiest to get a reaction from. I don't think they were like easy jokes about sex, but at least the topic already pulls people in. So like my first jokes were about bisexuality and a lot of people weren't talking about that at that time anyways.
So it wasn't just a dirty joke, it was something that was coming from you.
Yeah, exactly. But at least I knew that I was pulling people in, and I still do dirty. I like dirty material. I mean, even though it still always has like a bit of a political bent, or like sexual politics bent, I guess I'd say. It's all just jokes about Donald Trump's dick. Gross.
It still seems like it shouldn't be a taboo subject. It seems because it's all around us. It's in, people have been saying it for years. It's in the advertising. It's
exactly.
Is it that Carlin had a throwaway joke about how it's in the knitting patterns if you look hard enough in the the newspaper.
Yeah.
But it still makes people uncomfortable to talk about.
Yeah, and there's it's true, but also it does like if I'm performing for a real mainstream crowd that I need to get on board, then that's the material that I'll go to because at least that'll like perk up and pay attention. If it's not like, I sometimes can lose people with. Today anyways with sometimes with politics stuff which either because they're on the same side but they're just exhausted and they want an escape or they're from Virginia or something and they're just visiting New York for the weekend.
Ottawa, sorry Virginia.
Or what is the red part of Virginia.
I mean, did you always there was politics.
But those are my two topics, basically, which is like so hard. That's why I can't do corporate gigs very often because they're like, well, we don't want anything dirty and we don't want anything political. And I'm like, I don't have any. Like, that's like, those are like my two main kind of topics, I guess.
Well, you said that comedy can be akin to activism in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
How so? How do you feel it can have an effect? 'Cause I've asked comedians this kind of question a lot of socially minded comedians. Where does it actually work as an influencer?
I mean, it's hard to see. There's no real in policy you tend to have these kind of follow-up impact studies where it's like, we're giving you this much money to carry out this program, now show us what the impact has been on this community or whatever. So there isn't that same kind of possibility in comedy to look at the real impact of things. But when I was in The Hague, in addition to watching The Office, I was watching a lot of The Daily Show, and that was when I first got turned on to the idea that comedy could be an effective tool for advocacy. Because I do think, in particular, The Daily Show had a huge impact in a way that we hadn't seen yet, and now there's a lot of shows that are in the same vein of The Daily Show. But early on, the way that Jon Stewart went after Tucker Carlson and that Crossfire show that ended up getting canceled, and now people have become so entrenched in their side that I don't know if it's just a lot of preaching to the choir type stuff, in terms of people aren't necessarily tuning into The Daily Show or Last Week Tonight with John Oliver that don't share the same political views.
Well, we're a niche society now.
So that makes it a little harder. But when you're out, if you're out there on stages and you're traveling around the country, if you have a way, there's a way to say things where you can reach people, I think. No matter what your view is, there's a way through humor, I think, if you approach a joke in the right way. And the audience has to be a little bit open to it as well. But you can sometimes draw them into where they like you with other stuff, and then you can throw the stuff that you really want to say at them.
Is that where the dirty joke comes
dirty
in?
Jokes will looson people, lube them up a little bit, and then,
and you can hit them with something
the
political.
other stuff, And because the thing is, if an audience likes you, they'll listen to what you're saying, and sometimes it always shifts people's perception to learn something about people they don't know. I mean, like I've just been watching, especially like if they haven't met. If they haven't heard the story of especially if it's like on a personal front, if they haven't heard marriage jokes, like, that are just like marriage jokes, but they're about like a Jewish Palestinian lesbian marriage, it's like,
which is what you are
which
in,
is what
so people know.
No, I'm just in a straight relationship. I just like to
just
pretend.
For instance, I don't know, just tossing it out.
See how it works. Then it's like it personalizes something that people haven't seen before, and they relate to it in the sense of like, oh, it's a marriage. Like I'm in a marriage. That happens in a marriage. Also in my marriage, then it kind of, I think that's a place where things open up a little bit for people. I mean, my wife especially, like her biggest fans always are Jews, and they often haven't, because they're so curious, because they haven't.
And you're Jewish and
I'm
she's
Jewish.
Palestinian.
Yeah, I should make that clear. Yeah, she's the Palestinian one, and like when I tell jokes, often Jews, not that Jews don't like me, but they're like, sometimes they're like, oh, like why are you telling people that kind of thing about us, But with her, they're like so curious about her perspective, and she has such a charismatic way of being, and such a funny way of telling her jokes, that they're kind of like, you can't help but have that like laughter response. When you laugh, you're open. There's no denying that kind of physical reaction.
I mean, that's got to be part of your relationship as well. You're both comedians. You're Jewish. She's Palestinian.
Yeah.
I mean, that has to define in some part how you interact with each other. Yeah,
and those two things, and again, both being comics, really, we just go back and forth a lot. I mean, a lot of the things that we joke a lot about, I guess we have our own like sort of roast daily roast battles, but and some of them are related to being Jewish or being Arab or Muslim and whatever. But and then there's just a series of like, weight stuff or like appearance stuff, or
it's got to get pretty.
Who's neat, who's messy, who's forgets stuff, who
It's got to get pretty dark, like in the car on the way to the gig sometimes, if you're tossing that stuff back and forth. Sometimes
we did a roast battle recently on Valentine's Day, and it was it was pretty funny. Although I guess I was like the more cutting one, because I've done more roast battles and she hasn't before, and so she sort of threw me under the bus by saying how much she loves me and how hard it was for her to write the jokes, and and I was just like,
thanks, son.
ISIS uses clips of Iman's comedy to teach women how to bomb,
And a Jewish Palestinian roast battle is not something I've heard of happening.
No, it was a one-off. The comedy club had like asked us to do it, and we weren't sure if it was a good idea, but anyway, we decided to go for it.
How did people react to that?
I mean, some of the jokes they really laughed, and it was sort of up and down. I mean, sometimes they got a little bit because it was supposed to be a couples thing, but we battled against each other, whereas like the next group were two couples working together to battle each other, and I was like, wait a second, like I didn't know that was an option, that we could work together. And then the last couple was exes, they were exes, so it was like funny, but we were actually married, so the audience I think got like worried, upset, or like like they were right. They reacted differently for some stuff, because they were like, oh no, she's like really insulting her wife.
Well, that's part of what I wondered, because we're being told that people are so oversensitive these days.
Right.
And I think it's true in some cases, but I don't think it's true universally. I've seen
not in
shows.
A roast battle context. I mean, that's like we're insulting, like it's two people on stage that have agreed to insult each other, and that like nothing is I mean, and you can, before you get together and do a roast battle, you'll ask the person, is there anything you don't want me to touch, and then
you go immediately for that list.
Exactly. But that's like a kind of like a little bastion, I think, where to me I feel like it's fine, but and the audiences that have come are there for that.
And are you less sensitive to that or more sensitive to that now that you're in New York, which is, I mean,
every day is a roast battle.
Every day is a roast battle. There's, Montreal, I know can be a cosmopolitan place as well, but New York, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know how comparable. I've been to Montreal, and I've been to New York. I don't know how comparable they necessarily are, but
What I appreciate about the rudeness about in New Yorkers is that it's not personal. It's like mostly just time based and patience based. You know, everybody's struggling to get somewhere. Everybody's struggling to live there. I mean, not everybody, obviously, but the people that you encounter on the subway and in daily life, it's not that easy to be there. So I think people are, you know, like sometimes even when someone offers to help you, it's like out of frustration. They're like, where are you going? Let me help you. Like, just so get out of the way, you know, like they see you looking at a map. They're like, how can I help you? But it's not like, oh, you know, I want to help you. It's just like, I want to help you so that you can move it along.
Right.
So, and also I like in the comedy scene that it's like it's so big and everybody is working so hard to achieve their dream that while there's like sometimes can be drama, it's like it's never really that petty because people don't have time for a lot of bullshit, you know? So whereas like in a smaller comedy scene, it's like, what are we even bothering with right now? You know, like none of us are going anywhere, you know, like why are we fighting over or jealous of or this person or that thing,
all like,
you know?
Good Night Saigon every night. We
Yeah.
will all go down together.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that play, yeah.
You have you have a show that you co-host in New York, I'm Dead?
Oh, yeah. So I started a weekly show, basically because actually this bar in Flatbush, where one of the co-producers lives, Jeff Zimmerman, it's a very cool bar. It's a zombie tiki bar, Caribbean themed, and it's...
So old school zombie, not
not Flatbush
dead.
Zombie. It's not, Flatbush Zombie has not...
It's voodoo zombie, not
rapper.
not chemical zombie.
Yeah. And there's a rap group called the Flatbush Zombie.
I didn't know that.
The Flatbush Zombies, yeah. And that's it, Flatbush Zombies? Yeah, anyway, it's not to do with the rap group, which come from that area. It's based on the drink, the zombie, which is like 8 kinds of rum or whatever. And they serve it in skull mugs and with alcohol-soaked gummy bears. Anyway, it's like the place is awesome, the staff is great, and they were looking to do comedy, and so we started this weekly show Wednesdays at 10, and it's called I'm Dead, and it's been really fun so far. So we've had like 4 of them, and it's an interesting mix because the neighborhood is starting to gentrify a little bit, and they definitely don't want gentrification there. And I'm white, and that guy Jeff is white, and then we have Gastor, who's our third co-producer, who's actually from East New York and isn't white, and so it's like a kind of the mix of the 3 of us, and we're trying to hold on to the local, like the people that frequent the bar, who are all African American for the most part, or a majority, and they're from the area, and so it's like a kind of like partly an urban room and partly like white people that come from social media that know me or Jeff and Gastor also, and we're trying to, like, it's like this interesting mix anyways, where we're figuring out how to comedically have everybody on board with the show, and just like,
because shows can be oddly segregated.
It can be, and I've never really played a lot of urban rooms, so I'm trying to figure out how I can make those people laugh, and and because we really want it to, and the bar really wants it to be a night where the neighborhood decides, wants to come and talk about it and make it a thing, and so far it's been pretty good. I mean, we're booking really diverse lineups as much as we can, people who will appeal to the neighborhood, and so we're figuring out the mix, but it's been cool, and it's definitely like one of the ways you really feel like you're part of a comedy scene is to start up a show with people, and so that's been cool.
You're going to be on Hush Money in a few weeks as well with Mayron.
He's from
Lillian
here.
Devane, yes.
So I met Mayron a couple years ago. I was with my friend Deanne. We were here doing a show at, oh my God, what's the place called? It was such a big venue, and we didn't realize how big it was, but it's anyways, we did a show called Girl on Girl on Girl Comedy. This was years ago that Deanne and I toured, and Mayron hosted it. It's like it's something connected to Harvard. I feel like what's that big venue? Is it
Oberon?
The Oberon?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Oberon. And we got into this situation where it was like, I think we didn't have to pay for the venue, but you had to make like a certain amount of money at the bar. But we had like I feel like it was like a Sunday night and like mostly all lesbian crowd that doesn't really drink that much. But we ended up getting enough people, and we were just like at a certain point giving away tickets on the street so that we would fill it enough that enough people would drink that we would like not have to pay this like crazy bar Anyway, it was like a whole scene, but it was a really good time, and Mayron hosted, and I just like loved him. And then I've seen
He's great. We just went down to see that show this last week.
Oh yeah, you went to see Hush Money?
Yeah, we were in town for a few days, so we went to see that.
Yeah, and Lillian is hilarious. He roasts. Speaking of roasting, he roasts Lillian on like her outfits in the most hilarious way. They're really funny co-hosts. So yeah, so I met him here, and I followed his career and Last Comic, and yeah, he's great. So Hush Money, and then I guess if we're talking stuff to plug, I'd mentioned that my wife and I have this cartoon that we started. It's called At the L Salomons, and it's basically like cartoon depictions of our daily life, some of our back and forth roasty moments, and just our interactions in the world with other people too. And
where can people find that? It didn't come up when I was looking.
Yeah, I guess we don't have a website for it, but it's on Instagram is the main place, because we and then also Twitter and Facebook, and so it's at the LEL Solomons SALOMONS. So we started calling ourselves the L Solomons
because her name.
She's El Husseini and I'm Solomon, and so that was like when we had our wedding. That was our like Gmail account for our SVPs, and then a really close friend of ours, this guy named Jesse Brown. He's the illustrator, and he illustrated us for like our wedding invitation. He's done a lot of graphic design for me. And so the three of us work on them. And every Tuesday we have a new cartoon that we put on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And Instagram we have also like a lot of bonus, like smaller little illustrations that we put out randomly other days of the week. So that's been we just started that recently, so that's been fun. Hopefully we'll like eventually have a website and like some animation and stuff. That's the goal.
So you say you're still finding yourself and you're just getting to finding your voice. So what's next? Where are you?
I mean, I hope to record an album in the fall, because that'll really be a culmination of the stuff that I've done since I started comedy, the jokes that I still love from the early days, and the newer stuff, and hopefully that will kind of coalesce an idea of like, this is 45 minutes or an hour of what I'm proud of, what I think is my voice. I think an album is good for that. So I'm going on my first headlining tour in Canada, so out west, and there I'll be able.
When is that coming up? So
that's coming up now the first 3 weekends of March. Edmonton and Calgary and Vancouver. JessSalomon.com for details, and there I'll be working out what the like 45-minute sets and stuff. So I think just getting on stage more and more, and hopefully touring and working on the the sitcom stuff, the cartoon, and that's it. I think hopefully getting all the goals that comics have, especially when you get to New York, submitting for writing gigs and getting on late night and that kind of thing. But the persona, I think, is just I'm leaning into this this person who I am, which is essentially someone who's like always been trying to do good in the world, but often failing and then apologizing for it.
So like the more you try to come up with the persona, the more you wind up who you are.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, exactly. It starts to reveal itself a little bit. There's one story that I'm going to be telling at CitySide that I've been working on, which is really like such a perfect example of all of this, which is a story about how my wife and I ended up going on a Kwanzaa bar crawl to support Black-owned businesses in Harlem over Christmas because we were, a Jew and a Muslim alone, and we didn't have much going on. And I trying to be a good ally, and I thought, supporting Black-owned businesses, that's always in the top easy 5 things you can do as a gentrifier in Brooklyn. And
there's a list that's
it's I read all these sort of
is that a BuzzFeed
there's
thing?
BuzzFeed feminists. There's The Root. I don't know. There's a bunch of these websites, whether they're feminists or Black websites that are
how to gentrify.
No, yeah, what you can do to at least, I don't know if they don't set it up as a carbon offset thing, but it almost feels like
the Caucasian carbon offset.
yeah, exactly. But that definitely is something that comes up in the those articles of how white people can be better allies to minorities.
Right.
So yeah, it checked a lot of boxes. But then when we showed up, we were the only white people. I was the only white person there, and I realized quickly that it was only for African American people. And so it's sort of a story that launches into that about deciding to get off my couch to do something out in the world that's positive, but that I would have been better off just staying on my couch.
So you wind up
done
going
more damage,
So Kwanzaa, what is this? What are we doing here?
Yeah. But yeah, it was a series, a very curb your enthusiasm type of day.
Right.
Yeah.
So JessSalomon.com, any place else you want to?
And then just Twitter, I guess, at Jess_Salomon.
And that's SALOMON.
That's right. Yeah, and same thing on Instagram. There's a Jess Salomon that got to Instagram first with no underscore. And I'll just say this is if you believe in that there's different timelines going on, and that we're probably right now in the one that's kind of the most messed up, or whoever's controlling it fell asleep at the wheel. This girl, just it was sort of shortly after the election, Jess Salomon on Instagram without the underscore reached out to me in a DM and said that she works at the UN and that she's always wanted to be a comedian. I am not even kidding you. And I told her to do not leave the UN, whatever you do. So yeah, I'm definitely the one with the underscore.
It seems like a single white female sort of thing.
It seems not, or a sliding door.
Somebody's going to wind up with a high heel to the eye.
Maybe, yeah. She wears high heels, this one. She's a younger, very attractive version.
Well, thanks for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
An arrow to the head isn't always a trend.
Thanks again to Jess Salomon for the conversation, and to CitySide Comedy in Boston for bringing her to town. You can find out more about her and see her tour schedule at JessSalomon.com, and that's SALOMON. If you enjoyed the conversation, please consider subscribing and or reviewing on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. If you've already done that, my eternal thanks to you. You can see galleries and reviews and all sorts of other good things at www.departmentoftangents.com, and we're also on Facebook and Twitter. And keep an eye out for our next episode, an interview with Rich Wentworth, artist and co-creator of the Hadron Gospel Hour podcast. And now our featured track of the week is a chapter from the audiobook version of comedian Laurie Kilmartin's Dead People Suck, a guide for the survivors of the newly departed. It's an odd sort of an audiobook, admittedly a morbid subject, but infused with Kilmartin's wit and buoyed by personal stories. It's a mix of live readings and studio tracks. It's a tug at the heartstrings, a cup of cold water in your face, and a lot of laughs. Find out more at www.kilmartin.com. This is Laurie Kilmartin reading from Dead People Suck.
The Dying Reader.
Planning your own death. Should you sneak out the back door like Bowie? When you find yourself in the dying stage of your life and everything feels out of your control, remember there are 2 decisions you still get to make. Who do you tell, and when do you tell them? Let's examine your options, none of which are good. 1. Tell your family. You may be thinking, let's keep it small. You are a modest person. You don't want to make a big to-do, as your generation says. Well, that is sweet and so naive. Allow me to describe the world you are about to leave, the one cooked up by these awful Generation X and millennial descendants of yours. There is no such thing as private, personal, or keeping it in the family. Grief is now a shared commodity. You might tell just your immediate family, but one of your shithead relatives will tell everyone. Because that is how we suffer now, publicly with hashtags. Come to think of it, you may be departing at just the right time. Because almost every word you say now is being tweeted by a boy or girl grandchild named Taylor. Option 2, tell no one. Oh, a tough guy. You're just gonna keep your PET scans to yourself and then drop dead one day? Maybe you don't wanna cause a fuss. Well, since you are clearly no expert on emotions, let me be the first to warn you, this death will indeed cause a fuss. In your wake and at your wake, you'll leave a funeral home full of loved ones who will never get what psychologists call closure. Closure is a thing that people less macho than you need. It helps them sleep at night. And if you don't give it to them, they will resent you forever and ignore all the good stuff you ever did. You're robbing people of their grand goodbye. And people like their grand goodbyes. They practice them in the shower like Oscar acceptance speeches. It's a conscience clearer. Prodigal sons want to come home, ex-wives want to forgive, and neighbors want to admit it was they who stole your newspapers all those years. Think of the squirming, the groveling, all the people saying, you know what, Pop? You were right. It's life's last gift, vindication. You don't want to miss it. Remember, everyone deserves one last bedside hug. Stop making your death about you and go out like Deborah Winger in terms of endearment. Option 3, tell everyone. Do you have your own Facebook presence? Have your posts been suffering from a lack of attention lately? Well, get an agent because you're about to become famous. Once you announce your prognosis, people will be drawn to you like a moth to a flame that's about to go out. And guess what? It's nice to have strangers pulling for you. We should all have a random Australian post, I'm praying for you, mate. Instead of golf claps from family members weak from despair, a Facebook death means a round of applause from people you've never met. Honestly, the best time to get famous is when you're dying. The public doesn't have time to get sick of you. There's no backlash or frantic attempt at a comeback. And just as your new fans are getting to know you, poof, you are gone. Too soon. The tricky thing is figuring out when to post about your situation. You may have strength early in your hospice, but it goes quickly. Give yourself a few days to bask in the love. Drop your impending death post at midnight like Beyonce dropped Lemonade. Then let your loved ones take over. They can read good wishes to you and respond for you. It gives them something else to do at your bedside besides cry. The risk here is that, like before you are dying, you may be unable to stop checking to see who liked your post. You might literally spend the rest of your life checking Facebook. What if someone doesn't respond to your prognosis? Will you get angry? Will you poke them? Will your last words be, that asshole didn't even wish me a good journey? Remember, don't take your Facebook grudge to the grave. Whisper it in the ears of a loved one. Make it their burden to hate follow this person when you're gone. You might be dead, but your resentment can live on. Pranks to play on the living. 1, die slowly. After you post that you're in hospice, linger a while. If only to see people on social media get annoyed with you. They'll see you updating and say, I thought this guy was supposed to be dead. They'll wonder if their sad face emojis were posted in vain. Number 2, toy with them. Don't post anything for a day or two. People will flood your wall begging for updates, then reappear, still here. Now is the time to mortify someone who posted an early RIP. 3, reiterate that you did everything right. It's human nature to blame the victim. The first thing your friends will wonder after, did he leave me any money, is, was it his fault? Did he smoke? Did he eat red meat? Did he drink? Did he take a baby aspirin every day like I told him to? It's also human nature to be a prick. Even if you somehow contributed to your disease, lie. Tell people you never smoked or drank, that you worked at a standing desk. Don't give those jerks the satisfaction of thinking they aren't next.
Are you an old man with daughters? Please shred your porn. Hello, old man. I hope you're not afraid of heights. Because after you die, your devastated daughter is going to place you on a pedestal 25 embellished stories high. Each story will glorify farty, crusty old you in a way that would embarrass a pharaoh. Your filthy dog-walking jacket will be taken off the rusty nail where it hung in the garage and placed under museum glass. Every so often, she will remove it and bury her face in its folds just to feel close to you. Please do not let this woman find your porn. Dads, we daughters are surrounded by men who watch porn all the time, at work or in the car or until the flight attendant orders them to stop. These are the men we tolerate, date, and sometimes marry. As we wax our vaginas and bleach our anuses to please this ruined generation, we cling to the hope that, at least my dad wasn't like that. Let us have this. We want to idolize you. If you don't mind, you're dead. We won't be able to introduce you to our new spouses or our new children. All we have left are stories to tell. We are like Italian Americans with Christopher Columbus. We'll overlook a million sins so we can throw our parade. Your death day will be a sad holiday for us, and we want to think about you, but only from the waist up. Do you watch porn online? Well, you must be a younger dad, and I'm sorry to hear that you are leaving too soon. That being said, pull yourself up by your cock rings and delete your browser history. If you can find Pornhub, you can hit Control-Shift-Delete. It's the golden shower rule. Are you worried about gross pictures saved to your hard drive? Speak honestly to a doctor about how sick you are. If you have stage 2 cancer, keep your porn in a locked folder called 1978 Taxes. No one will try to hack it. But if you are stage 4, you must push your hard drive into a swimming pool immediately. You don't have a moment to waste. There is no stage 5. Remember, we daughters have spent a lifetime being vexed by penises. The last thing we need to be reminded of after your death is that you had one too. Question: my daughter is gay. Can I leave my porn to her? She might like it. Answer: I know you mean well, but no. Destroy it and leave her enough money to buy her own porn. Question: what if my porn is gay? Answer: if your kids don't know that you're gay and you'd like them to, tell them face to face. Don't let them figure it out posthumously by finding your old copy of Cockfights Round 2. While there is no shame in being your honest self, your love of gay porn is a secret you can take to your grave. Or should I say, gave. If you are too weak to dispose of it, leave it in a place where your son will find it. If you have a son, trust me, he has been aroused by some sick shit, and he feels guilty. He will be grateful to discover that his old man was also a perv. He can take comfort in the fact that his disgusting fantasies, like his eye color, are genetic. Your son is a second, third, perhaps even fourth generation degenerate, and it's okay for him to know that. One day, he will log on to Ancestry.com and see that he is descended from a long line of men who liked gangbangs. If you don't have a son, how about a son-in-law? You gave your daughter away to him, he feels even worse about his porn. No son-in-law? No problem. Time for TaskRabbit. TaskRabbit is like Uber for chores. Open the app and search for handyman services. Then let Harry S. be your son for the day. When he arrives 15 minutes later, oh boy, this is already sounding like a porn movie. Tell him 5 stars if he gets rid of everything. Is there any handier man than one who removes incriminating evidence and doesn't know your last name? Are you old and about to die? A comprehensive list of things you should do first. Have a garage sale. After you're gone, everything you've touched will break our hearts. Look at all your possessions. Is there anything that you would be shocked to find us cherishing? What about that 25-pound dumbbell? Do you want your daughter cradling it in her arms, saying, "Dad lifted this"? Please give it away now, so our emotions are directed toward more meaningful objects, like a desk drawer full of loose AA batteries. Don't give it all away. Leave us one idiosyncrasy that we can enjoy. If you have 100 binder clips, take 99 to Goodwill. Let us find that one clip after you die and remember your hoarding with fondness. If we discover 100 binder clips by stepping on 100 binder clips, our fondness will turn to rage, and it's no fun being mad at someone who's dead. They aren't even aware of it. Write names on the backs of photos. If you're old, you look nothing like your young self. You didn't use sunscreen, you probably smoked. You aged horribly. Label yourself and old photos. Label everyone. I found a picture from the 40s, taken in Chicago, of my grandfather Frank sitting with his parents. Grandpa Frank wrote everyone's name on the back, including his own. My mom, now 79, looked at the front of the photo, then read the notes on the back and said, "I'll be damned, that is my dad." If your adult children don't recognize the young you, your descendants will be completely lost. If you are attractive, write your name on the front of your photo. I came across a picture from the 30s of 2 male lifeguards clowning around in their swimsuits. The lifeguard on the left had an amazing body, and I thought, wow, that guy is fucking fine. I turned the picture over, read the names on the back, and discovered I was fantasizing about my grandpa Frank. Were you hot back in the day? Then write your name on the front of your pictures. If my grandpa had printed Frank across his manly, toned chest, I wouldn't feel gross right now. Remember, your kids will only become interested in your past after you're not around to talk about it. If cancer was an STD, there would be a cure by now. Cancer has been around since the dinosaurs. HIV, on the other hand, might be 100 years old. It only started killing people in large numbers in the 1980s. 35 years later, it can be contained with a cocktail. A vaccine seems imminent. Remember syphilis? 1,000 mobsters tried to kill Al Capone. Only the clap finished him off. Syphilis is now 100% treatable. When sex kills, humanity comes together for a cure. But with cancer, we're bringing pink ribbons and yellow wristbands to a gunfight. It's too bad all cancers aren't transmittable through bodily fluids. Michael Douglas famously said he got mouth cancer from performing cunnilingus. Months later, Michael Douglas's mouth cancer was cured. Coincidence? Or frantic work by an oncologist who likes to eat pussy? Imagine how quickly brain tumors would dissolve if men got them from receiving blowjobs. Cancer, suicidal or dumb? Cancer has one dream, to spread until it kills its host and itself. No matter what kind of life form one is, this plan makes no sense. In the early 2000s, I found a cheap, illegal sublet on Manhattan's Upper West Side. I moved in quietly and gratefully. My goal was to live there until I got caught. My goal wasn't, let's burn this place down with me in it. Cancer is dumb. Cancer is the opposite of suicidal. It keeps trying to live, but it can't figure out how. Every day, cancer forms in 1,000 new bodies, excited about its future. And every time, the story ends in one of 2 ways. The cancer is killed or the body is killed. Cancer never learns. It's been trying to survive for millennia, but, like Lenny from Of Mice and Men, it only knows how to pet things to death. Ebola, to its credit, knows when to jump ship. When its host is going down, Ebola doesn't remain on board. It searches for a new body. Ebola cannily looks around the hospital room and jumps into the first person not wearing a beekeeper's suit. Ebola is vicious and efficient. Ebola is also, as of this telling, contained. Cancer is not just dumb, it's greedy. Months after I moved into my illegal studio sublet, I heard about a 1-bedroom for rent down the hall. If I'd told the management company, "Hi, I want to move my son into that 1-bedroom," they would have looked at the name on the lease and said, "Wait a minute, your son? But your name isn't even on the lease. Who are you? Get out." I would have been evicted. So what does cancer do after sneaking itself into a nice warm lung? Does it stay small and cause its host minor but treatable breathing issues? No. Cancer gets greedy. Cancer starts having babies and sending them all over the body. They move into the pancreas, the liver, the brain. That's when the doctors start looking at x-rays and saying, "This tumor's name is not on the lease." It ends badly for everyone. If my dad's cancer was smart, it would have nestled into his pinkish left lung and enjoyed 10 years of Slow Hikes and MASH reruns. Remember, all cancer is bad, but when a man gets mouth cancer, at least we know he's a good husband.
Neil Young.